From KUNC and the NPR network, this is In The NoCo. I'm Erin O'Toole. When a natural disaster strikes, we often think of children as the most vulnerable of victims. Picture families forced to evacuate during a wildfire, or kids forced to take remote classes for months during the pandemic. A University of Colorado researcher says this thinking may be too simplistic, that it overlooks the ways children help out during and after a disaster, and the importance of letting kids help respond to a chaotic world.
What are children doing? How are they helping each other? How are they helping their families, their schools, their communities?
That's Lori Peak. She's a sociology professor and director of the Natural Hazards Center at CU Boulder. She studies how communities respond to natural disasters, and she's particularly focused on how children help out. She's giving a talk on the topic Wednesday in Boulder, and she joined me to talk about her research. Lori, you have been studying how kids respond to disasters for decades, going back to Hurricane Katrina in 2005. You documented kids helping to rescue their families during flooding and even cleaning up schools afterward. Could you share a story from Hurricane Katrina that stuck with you?
It is hard to believe that it has been 20 years since Hurricane Katrina. One story I will never forget, one of the first families that we interviewed in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, one of the boys who was in our long-term study, we call him Daniel in our book, and he was 12 years old at the time of Hurricane Katrina, and he was living with his mother and had a baby sister. And after the levees broke, their apartment began to fill with water as the neighborhood was flooding. And Daniel's mother could not swim. And she was panicking.
Yeah.
So what Daniel said to his mother, he said, what we're going to do, we're going to take the bed sheet. I'm going to wrap it around you and my baby sister. And I'm going to then lead you through the floodwaters. And that is what he did. They ended up in the Superdome in New Orleans. It was such a moment of recognition that we would hope no child would ever be in that situation, a matter of life and death, where he was forced to take that action. But it was also this recognition of how he was able to, in that moment, act in such a decisive way that really may have saved his family's lives.
It really runs counter to this idea that kids are just helpless and vulnerable, and that's it. You've been studying the Marshall Fire lately that destroyed about 1,000 homes in Louisville and Superior in 2021. How did children play a role in responding after that disaster?
I mean, the Marshall Fire was obviously so devastating, with over 1,000 homes burned, with so many children that lost their homes. If they didn't lose their homes, they may have been in classes where their teachers lost their homes or their fellow classmates lost their homes. And so as part of a talk that I'm giving on Wednesday at CU Boulder, a young man named Liam, he is actually going to join me as part of that talk. He and his family actually lost their home when he was only 12 years old. And I actually connected with him through one of the recovery groups that sprung up after the Marshall Fire. And Liam played a big role in helping other young people to show up to the community recovery meetings and to be able to really take actions for himself, but also on behalf of others. He also helped to encourage fellow children and adolescents and youth to come to these meetings. And he was great. He said, they had ice cream. That really helped. He said, I think one of the things that's so important is that when you're a kid, you don't want to stand out. You don't want people to feel sorry for you. You want to blend in. And I said, but that's so counterintuitive to how adults often respond, that we feel like, what can we do to help? We need to ask you, how can we balance that? And he said, that's true. You do need that support and you want that support, but you don't want to be made to feel like a victim.
Sure. And part of me wonders if this is a little too, blue sky-ish to feel inspired by kids helping out after homes and schools are destroyed. Part of it seems like this is children having to step in when adults have not gotten the job done. What is your take on that?
Yes. And I guess I have two responses to that. First, I would say that it's important. This is true, that it's important to document these stories and to really tell the stories of what children are doing, both how they're suffering, but also how they're contributing. And
Mm.
that's important. And it's not just a sort of fluffy feel-good story, because we know that acting altruistically, acting on behalf of others, that's actually integral to survival and to recovery. When we do things for other people, it actually helps us to heal
Hmm.
because it helps us to connect. It helps us to be in community. And that's key to recovery. The other thing is that while there is so much that kids can do and are doing in the context of disaster preparedness and response and recovery, that is no replacement for having a strong social safety net. We need to have strong social systems, strong and supportive social fabrics that can hold us all together, but also recognize that there is an important role that children can play in the context of disaster.
And on that note, how do you think people who manage disaster response, maybe elected officials, should think about children's relationship to natural disaster?
Children are coming of age in an era where we are experiencing more disasters at more rapid intervals. And so kids' lives more frequently are being disrupted by disaster. But I also think it's important to understand that children and youth are contributing in so many important ways, from raising money, delivering food to vulnerable populations, making personal protective equipment on 3D printers, creating art that was shared in schools and community places. And so there were all kinds of ways that children have contributed to the collective well-being. And I think when we pay attention to that, that is our best pathway for figuring out ways to get children involved in disaster preparedness response and recovery.
And it sounds like it's important not just for the community and its recovery, but it really helps kids in their own
Mhm.
recovery process to know that they have helped.
Indeed, I've witnessed this over the years where it can really be life-changing, life-altering. I've seen kids who they've become deeply involved in their communities, they volunteer more, and so I think that where as adults we can make a real difference is asking ourselves, where is there an opportunity for children and youth to be engaged, to make sure their voices are being heard, and to make sure that they have an opportunity to contribute in age-appropriate ways before, during, and after a disaster.
Lori Peak is a researcher and director of the Natural Hazards Center at CU Boulder. She studies how children respond during and after natural disasters. She'll give a talk about her research Wednesday evening in Boulder. We'll have details in the show notes and at KUNC.org. That's it today for In The NoCo. I'm Erin O'Toole. Thanks so much for listening.